Good evening. It's not often you come somewhere and you um, have someone introduce you that has the same last name. So I'm going to thank Cousin Reed for that warm introduction. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here with you this evening. The program so far has really been moving, and I'm very pleased to see the turnout. Now, I don't know if you came here just to inquire about who this person was they invited, or you came here because someone said you get some extra credit. But if you were like me when I was at Morehouse, anything that involved extra credit and didn't take too much time, I wanted to do. Because you never knew when you were going to need that extra point or two. And so with that, I want to thank everyone who's participated so far tonight. I want to commend the United Voices Gospel Choir for that wonderful selection. You know, one thing they didn't mention in my bio is that I'm very active on social media. So you may have seen me pull out my phone, and I'm trying to post some things and upload some things, and I didn't get to Twitter because I didn't get my connection. But you can follow me on Twitter at Stephen Lewis Reed. That's Stephen with a V, Lewis with an OU, and Reed with a double E. So I always have to say that when people ask about those things, and I'm on Facebook at Judge Stephen L. Reed as well. To the president of this great university, Dr. Kyle Marrero, I want to thank you for supporting an event such as this, and thank you for your leadership here. To Dr. Lingrel and Mrs. Lingrel, thank you all for being here as well. And to Dr. Whitaker, thank you for being here. It's always, I think, an understated sign and symbol when you have the leadership of an organization and the leadership of a university that's taking part in an event such as this. To all those who are here, the fellow program participants and elected officials, to the county commissioner, I know what type of job that is in working with our county commission back in Montgomery, and to the most important people who are here, the students of University of West Georgia. Thank you again for allowing me to come here. I want to also give a special props to Ms. Deidre Rouse, Director for the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, for extending an invitation for me to come speak here tonight. Now, I don't know what the time limit is, but I do know about the 5 Bs. The 5 Bs are pretty much instructive because they are be brief, brother, be brief. So I will be just that, and I will do like Halle Berry told her third husband, I'm not going to keep you long. And she didn't. I don't know if my cousin is here, Dr. Tammy Lyles Arnold. She's a pediatrician here in Carrollton, and told me she wasn't sure if she was going to make it. I don't see her, so I just want to give her a shout out because I'm going to be staying with her and her family, and I think she's the best doctor in this area. And I know that because since she's a few years older than us, she's been doctoring for a long time. She was doctoring when we were growing up, as our mothers are both sisters, and she was always one to tell us what was wrong with us. But ironically enough, there was never anything wrong with her. So go figure. But as I was doing my research, Dr. Marrero, I noticed that there's been a lot of good things taking place around here, and I mentioned that to you a second ago. However, the thing that caught my attention were the 8 values that guide the mission and daily operations of University of West Georgia. And I say that because I think 3 in particular have a direct correlation to the man we're here celebrating tonight. The value of caring is evident in our consistent concern and regard for our students, staff, and faculty, as well as the larger community where we live and whom we serve. The value of inclusiveness is evident in our commitment to celebrating diversity, our collaborative spirit, and creating a welcoming campus that is emotionally and physically safe for all. Third, the value of wisdom, which is evident in our commitment to teaching and learning that emphasizes knowledge for the purpose of positively transforming lives of our employees and students, as well as improving the world in which we live. Caring, inclusiveness, wisdom. three powerful values that could be attributed to the life and deeds of Dr. Martin Luther King. As a Morehouse man, one might assume that the legacy of Dr. King and the legacy of my alma mater's most recognized alumnus would be something I would rush and always be proud to illuminate. And it is. But the connection to Dr. King goes a lot deeper than that. See, Mr. Gressick, in 1960, Dr. King invited then SGA president of Alabama State, Joel Reed, to lead the sit-in movements of the lunch counters in downtown Montgomery. He caught notice of my father at that time because he thought he was an awesome student leader. He thought that he had done a great job organizing and knew he had been outspoken about many of the issues that people in Montgomery were dealing with. See, at the time, you kind of have to realize this, and maybe some of you already know, but the students were really the ones who were leading the movement. The students were the energy. The students were the change. And so being handpicked to lead the sit-in movement got my father kicked out of Alabama State University, only to appeal it after a semester to be allowed back in. But having done a pretty good job, I think, in integrating then downtown Montgomery retail shops and lunch counters, he was asked to go to Raleigh, North Carolina. And he was asked to go there with other student leaders to form the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Many of you all may know that as SNCC. Well, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee went on to become, again, a student-led and a student-driven movement, along with the SCLC and the NAACP and many of the other, the Dallas County Voters League, and many of the other groups who were marching at that time. Well, their paths stayed in touch, but they crossed again in 1967. And that was less than a year before Dr. King would lose his life, when he came back to Montgomery to speak to the Black Teachers Association. The man leading the Black Teachers Association at that time was a 28-year-old Joel Reed who had met Dr. King some 70 years before. And the connection there and the symbolism there is captured in a picture that I'll show when we're done here speaking. And so the connection with Dr. King and this legacy is familial, but it doesn't stop there for me. My mother, my cousin Tammy's mother as well, both of them being sisters, are from Perry County, Alabama. Many of you may not be familiar with that, but Perry County is home to Marion, Alabama. You may not still be familiar with that. But if you're familiar with the movie Selma or you're familiar with history, you know that's where Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed. Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed in Marion, and that is what really galvanized the Selma to Montgomery Voting Rights March. Well, there's another lady who's from Perry County, and her name was Coretta Scott. And my mother, coming on the tail end of a family of 10, had older siblings who went to school with Mrs. King, went to Lincoln High School. And so she knew one side, and my father came to know another side. And it was a blessing for me because in the 8th grade, Mrs. King came to stay with us, and it's something that I still remember to this day. She actually stayed in my sister's room, and it was such a big occasion. This was before, obviously, camera phones and Facebook and Instagram feeds and all the things that we have at our disposal in our hands right now. And so I couldn't take a picture. I couldn't, tweet it out. I couldn't do any of that. But I did ask my dad if I could take her to school. And he said, no, boy, you can't take her to school. She's here for some business. She's not here for show and tell. But riding around with Mrs. King around Montgomery and listening to her talk about what she remembered, and this was in the late 80s, was something very significant. Because once we got to the house where they had once lived, the house that was bombed, she talked about that and she paused about that. And we stood there for a minute, and she just looked around on Jackson Street at how things had changed. And she didn't say very much, but she got back in the car and we rode around a little bit more. The last time I would see Mrs. King would be at the 50th anniversary of the bus boycott in Montgomery. And she came there and she spoke, as well as sort of her daughter, Reverend Dr. Bernice King. And my dad walked over and said, Coretta, how you doing? And she said, Joe, we're doing fine.